I think it's always good to have an external perspective, and then you can assess if you want to take it or not. As a small business, you tend to be stuck in your problem or their problem and don't see outside that. When you share with a mentor or with a business coach, it gives you a different perspective.
Welcome to Long-Term Thinking for Business Success, a show for and by business owners. Each episode will explore how to beat the odds and create a sustainable business and the life we've dreamt of. Today's guest is Natalie Scipioni, the founder of Natalie Scipioni Architects. Natalie completed a Doctor of Architecture in Florence, followed by a postgraduate study in Heritage Architecture in Paris. Her background has given Natalie an internationally honed understanding of structure, space, and orientation. She brings these skills to designing the exterior and interiors of home, restaurants, hotels, or offices. For the last 20 years, she's worked on architecture and heritage restoration projects in Florence, Italy, and Australia. Natalie relocated to Sydney and founded Natalie Scipioni Architects in 2007. She maintains a constant contact with developments in Europe, travelling annually to the world's most forward-looking trade shows to bring back concepts, materials, products, and to ensure her designs continue to be far ahead of local trends. Hi Natalie, welcome to the Long-Term Thinking for Business Success podcast, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Given your vast international experience, can we start by going a few years back so that we can understand your background and why you ended up living and working in Sydney, Australia?
I grew up in Italy with a French mother and Italian father. I studied architecture in Florence. Then I lived in Paris and worked in Paris for 10 years. Then happened an opportunity to have an experience for a year in Australia. I arrived in 2005 and I'm still here and staying here. I used to restore monuments in France. That was my specialty. In France, it's very particular because only one school train in heritage, and only the people who train in this school can touch or restore heritage. So it was very specialized. So I came to Australia in 2000 and I must say I didn't speak much English. I was school-based, but for me it was important to work. My first job after 3 months, I was on a heritage team when they were doing carriage work in Italy. So it was quite an interesting project. So the fact I had experience in heritage helped me to find this employment. Then after 2 years, I worked with this company. Then I work in different other company, still heritage, also on commercial. I touch a little bit of everything, even high-end residential. And at the end of 2007, I thought maybe I can try by myself. And that when I start my company.
Can you tell us why you started your own firm versus joining another practice and what you're trying to achieve? Put that another way, what was the vision that you wanted to deliver in opening your own firm?
It was more to be independent in my ideas and be recognized for the design I do. I felt I couldn't express myself in the way I wanted. And just was an opportunity finally. I was finishing a job and then finally ended up for myself buying a property that was completely run down and wanted to renovate it for a family home. And at the same time, like everyone start a business like this, a friend of a friend wanted to renovate their house in Paddington. And then I started to do that. And then that's how we started. Say, I give it a try and see how it's going. I had young children at the time, so I could be more flexible. That's what I thought. If your own business, you can be flexible. But in reality, I'm flexible, but I'm working more hours.
Yes.
But it was good for me having 3 young children to manage as well. And that's how we started.
Given the competitive nature of architecture, did you identify or find a gap that you could provide an opportunity for the type of work you wanted to do? Or did you just start and see where it took you?
The challenge I had is I didn't know anyone and I didn't have connection. The advantage where I knew heritage, I do interior design as well. I could take a project from concept to construction. What I was trying to set as a different probably is my European background, both Italian and French. I try to use different material because in Italy there are a little bit of different things, an idea and product more advanced because It's a bigger population as well. And importing things like this, having something interesting. I add in a lot of color. So a little bit different than what you see commonly in architecture in Australia. Background in heritage make me think differently, like when you renovate a house, to have the addition in a contemporary way. So I don't think it was a gap, but the way I presented myself, I can bring something a little bit different, a little bit unique, if you like, a different style at the same time. I'm not the kind of architect to say, you do what I want, or I'm not working for you. So I don't have one particular style. I always adjust to the client vision. What is important for me is always maximize the space, natural light, and the feeling of the space. The way I started, because I didn't know anyone, it was start to networking, just find out networking group. Through the school of my kids, I start to have my first couple of clients like this. And also a lot of networking as well. So I had to try to connect with other people and understand how you do business in Australia. I did also a lot of personal development with business coach, experience.
You obviously have a very strong passion and commitment to education and learning. That's demonstrated in both your doctorate and obviously your postdoctorate. I'd like to come back and discuss your personal development and networking later on. When you think back over those last 16 years, what are you most proud of? Or to put that another way, what's the success that when you think back, you go, I'm really pleased that I did that?
I started was at the back of my house in what was a study that I converted in my office. It was like a small room with a separate entrance. The company name was a more generic company, because also when I start, I was not a registered architect in Australia. I was in the inner west at the back of my house with one of two students working with me. Now I have a nice office in Double Bay with a window and a screen on the main street, with 5 to 6, 7 people working for me and getting more the client I dreamed to have. There's still more to do. There's always a goal. From when I started, where I wanted to achieve a lot and I was very passionate to get somewhere with all this obstacle to having children and all of that, and the English and the culture, because there is a clash of culture as well, and to get somewhere that I can say I have an interest in business still to develop, but it's a good business.
Congratulations for just surviving 16 years. That's something to be proud of on its own. It's not easy being in small business. I know, I've been in it for 20 years as well. Are there any projects that you've worked on that you really look back and go, I'm really proud of that work?
Before I started my business, I was very passionate of what I was doing. I was restoring monument. I was in charge of UNESCO heritage listed monument. It was different kind of work, but it was very interesting. I was an employee, but I went to a level where I was creating beautiful building and recognized. This is one part of my career. For myself is, I think every project for me that get completed and the client is happy and it look beautiful and the client had the good experience and I can see what has been started in a sketch paper becoming reality, that I'm proud of with all of them.
You mentioned that running a small business, there are always multiple priorities. It sounds like you're still very active both in the design of buildings, interior and exterior. You also have priorities of running the team and just managing and running the business. Given all of these things, could you share what your top priorities are today and what you do to remain focused on them?
Top priority in my business is customer service, number one priority for me, and how to educate team working with me on that. A lot of architects are good architects, and there is a lot of architects. There is a price difference, but what is important is that the client is happy and feel confident in a process, especially when you do residential and residential for your own house, that they feel confident and happy to be guided through the process. For me, customer service and giving a lot to the client, not only to the design and to achieve it, but also the communication. These are the most important things that I try to educate everyone around me. We guide them through the process and manage the project from architecture, interior and heritage, and project management as well. The idea is to guide the client through the construction, but be able to still keep a good experience and have a good result at the end.
I'd like to go a little bit deeper into that. Forging strong relationships with clients is critical to a successful project. And I understand you've got a team and you're not the only architect that's working on the project or dealing with clients day to day. But could you share some of the specific practices you use to build the relationships with clients so that your team and the client clearly understand and comprehend the vision of the project you're taking on?
I break down the process in stages. So what I do also, I collect images from the client, and each stage I describe what we will do in the process. And what I say to my employee as well, maximum a client has to wait 48 hours to respond. We try to keep to that. It's not always possible, especially in residential, there is a lot of demand.
Earlier, you mentioned some of the professional development work you have done with Tony Robbins and other mentors. How has the work you did with your mentors been impactful in developing your approach to customer service and building relationships with clients?
I think everything I've done and every experience I had contribute to develop the business and my experience. Each project is quite unique, and each time I have a challenge or an issue, I keep as an experience. I try to share with my team because I end up being a single mom with 3 kids. This business needed to work. I needed to find a way to make it happen. I think a big course I did with Tony Robbins, it was in Las Vegas in 2019. It was business mastery. I learned a lot there about how to improve financially a business. And I since apply a lot of that, like having meeting with my bookkeeper every 2 weeks, going through invoice and share that with the team, having meeting with the team once a week to go through all the project from the stage of the process, what's happening, but also the finance, and be very strict on the time spent. So it's something I monitor a lot.
I think so much of the financial side, especially pricing strategies that we use in small business, and our relationship with money, not necessarily the value we create for our clients, and the stories that we tell ourselves about money and finances gets in our own way and limits our own success.
Just to add also as to say, learn your value and how to say no sometimes to client and put some boundaries. I think I learned that as well financially.
It's amazing how powerful saying no is as business owners. The sooner we learn to embrace that power, the more successful we can become. Just to jump back a little bit, earlier you mentioned that you meet with your team every week. You said at these meetings you discuss the status of projects, where they're up to in the process, but you also review the financials. Often, as small business owners, we're hesitant to share too much of the financial status of the business with the team. Could you just talk to us a little bit about how, by sharing your financials, that has helped you as a business owner, both in terms of building relationships with your team and then educating and training your team to understand the commercial realities of the project? How has this helped you really run the business more effectively?
Architects are not trained to understand finance, are trained to do at university beautiful things, nothing practical, and not looking at the financial side. So I must say everything is transparent in this business. People has access to the fees, but it's a way for me to make them responsible. So what I do is we have a timesheet, we have a software where every project is transparent for everyone, has his own budget and its own limited hours. We monitor that every week. The challenge is the architect to understand, but a lot of people struggling with that. And they found it's a big pressure because they can't manage the time. It's a skill time management on a project and took on itself. It's good for me because I want to create responsibility on people. But what I found more and more, there is less responsibility taken in people and there is more expectation than, so there is all this mentality where I take and then I give. Instead, I give and then I take. That is my philosophy. And that's how I grew up. I'm very strong on that. When I come to Australia, I didn't know anything. I come from big high-end job. And then I start from zero here with a small salary because I didn't speak English and learning through the process. I'm expecting people to earn what they're doing. Doesn't mean I exploit people, but the people who I can see give value, they are shining here. But there's a lot of people who will not understand the process and the system as a business owner.
I fully understand that. As you know, I run a marketing business. We're also obviously a creative business. Not that we sell on time, but we always work out the effort required on every project, and we manage our time to the estimate that we've created for the project. There's always people who appreciate that and understand the value of that versus a struggle with that. So I definitely understand where you're coming from. Just to go a little bit deeper on you and your team and how you manage your team, I'm sure you can appreciate a business is really just a collection of people who have to work effectively together. You've already talked a little bit about this, but I'd love to go a little bit deeper in terms of what processes, habits, or rituals you use to motivate and mentor your staff so that you get the best out of them. Also, as your team has grown from you, as you said, you started with just you in the back of your house, now in your office in Double Bay, how have those systems and processes changed over time?
A lot of room for improvement, and my goal is to have a proper system. I start to have some structure and share that with the team, share also the vision of the business. So my idea is the people who stick with that and understand the big picture will be rewarded for that. That is my way to motivate, which is also a natural selection as well. There are people not interested for that, and there are people who are, and there are the people who's I think will grow with me and with the business. What I try to share is help me to grow the business. If we can do together, everyone we can benefit for that. And that is my motto.
I really love that. It's similar to the position that I take when I explain it to my staff and others that people like us do things like this. So if you want to be a part of our team, these are the behaviours and attitudes that we expect you to follow. Then we reward and encourage the positive behaviours so that everybody starts to see the actions we want them to do, and therefore that discourages inappropriate behaviour. Ultimately, if team members don't want to behave in the way we want them to, then they realise that this is probably not the right place for them or us having them, and they move on, which is, I think, similar to what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, but there is a lot of competition. So I understand bigger firm, a bigger budget, less work, or everyone has a different culture.
There are people that love small business, that love working in a tight team, that want the variety of experience that I'm sure you would bring them versus if they were in one of the major architecture firms.
What I said is you will learn a lot here because I think I've also put people on the little bit on the deep. I guide them. Again, it's a two-way. Some people will be thriving and some people will be failing.
Just to go slightly deeper, you mentioned that you're trying to make sure your team clearly understands the value and vision that you want to create. Could you tell us about the methodologies or the habits and rituals that you use to continually share and remind people of the vision and values of the firm?
I have ritual. I think the Monday meeting is a kind of ritual. So we know everyone is expecting to go to this meeting, even if it's not their project, they have to listen to everyone project. But also we start with the general vision, with the marketing. So I think this is the main one. I try to do as much as we can some social event. I think it's very important. I would like to do more of them, but sometimes we get sidetracked with work.
We never have enough time.
We always wish more than what we can do.
Correct. Always. Just to go a completely different direction. Often the most valuable learnings we get come from some sort of setback or hardship. Could you share a story of an adverse challenge or an event that has occurred in your business that has fundamentally led to a positive change and what you learnt from that experience?
There are many. So maybe I pick one. I had a terrible experience with the builder I recommended. I think sometimes I trust people more than I should. And I trust the system. So I recommend a builder for a project and he went in a very bad way. So without going into detail, from there, When I found myself in some trouble, at least a stressful situation, I reach out to an architect I always was inspired to. I always say to myself, I would like to be like him, that his company. So what I did, I contacted him. And at the time he helped me, he supported me on that, but also asking to be my mentor. So it made me have the courage to approach someone.
Is there any specific you learnt from that on potentially how you either select builders in the future or how you manage the builders in the project management phase of your work?
I don't know if I can learn from that because you never know. Managing builder, it's always a challenge. It depends on the personality. I think I don't want to sound a little bit feminist, but I think a woman present differently. It's in a male dominated industry. So it's an extra work for me to be firm, but also be myself. I think I appear more easygoing compared to what I really am, and I can be very firm. So there's some challenge in that. And I just need to be careful to refer people and maybe not taking responsibility on that. I think at the time, if I was less honest, we could have been better, but I don't want to change. That's
No.
my challenge. I'm always maybe too transparent and I don't want to lie or hiding things. And probably that has been the challenge in this particular situation where I pinpoint the issue and it went in a very bad direction. Yeah.
We learn so much about what values are important to us when someone's value is completely different and they rub up against each other. Obviously, there was an issue with transparency and possibly honesty between you and that builder, and that's where that conflict you had has come from. That probably goes all the way back to how you now manage your team. When you've got the people on the team that have the same values that you have, then it's easy to work with them because there's a common ground versus the tension between a conflicting value. It can be a small or large tension, but if there's misalignment of any value in the relationship, that's often where they become unstuck.
Yes. And felt supported by the team at the time, which was good. And the person has been working with me and support me on that, is growing with me and I really become part of the business. Him and his family as well.
I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into the coaching you've had. So it sounds like you've used coaching and had mentors throughout your career. What's one or two of the reasons why you chose to have a coach or mentor? And what value have you gotten from that experience?
I think it's always good to have an external perspective and then you can assess if you want to take it or not. As a small business, you tend to be stuck in your problem or their problem and don't see outside that. When you share with a mentor or with a business coach, it gives you a different perspective. My mentor has a bigger company, much more established, but fundamentally he has the same problem as me. And so I feel less lonely. I feel like that's what it is. And I just have to go through the process and adjust and learn and keep going. Everything is a learning. It can be a coach, or it can be a mentor, or it can be a client, or it can be an experience. I believe that everything has something and can be good or bad, but I'm always open to improve and learn.
Is there an example or something in your business, an issue that you were dealing with, that your mentor or coach helped you see it from a different perspective and solve it differently than you would have based on your own experience and judgment?
No, it's more understanding the bigger perspective and having different tool and recommend me to different people to support the situation.
Earlier, you mentioned that when you started out, your approach to building your business was through networking and building networks and meeting people that way. I often get told that referrals and recommendations are a small business's most effective source for new leads. But often, the process for managing referrals is more by luck rather than intentional and a considered methodology. Given you have to build the business through a network and referrals, is this still the main way you generate your leads? And do you use a systemized process to generate referrals and recommendations for your business?
I don't do any more networking. I've been doing it for 10 years. And I think to start the business and keep going with the business was very good. I think in a position, what I'm looking for doesn't work with networking, the standard networking anymore. So I'm having a pause from that for time as well. I found that my business funnel is working through more marketing and more based on the work, because it's visual, the work I've done. What I notice is, yes, there are some referral from previous clients, from people I know, from my previous networking, but also people come to me through Google as well, because what they see, they like what they see. Then it's up to me to do a good sales pitch and express myself and show how I can help them.
Can you share some of the marketing activities that you do that has been successful and helped you generate leads? Have these been on Google, or are you doing other things that have successfully generated you a consistent lead flow?
No, I don't do advertising on Google. What advertising I do is on House. It's a platform specialized in the resident. Sometimes I throw myself on things. I take risk. So when they start in Australia, I think 5 years ago, I was one of the first to just take it on board. It's my biggest source of lead generation, because I think they have an SEO system. Also, that's why people see me on Google. I think was a good one. The rest come as COVID has been very busy time. Now it's more normal. I think one of the way I believe in marketing is being in a nice area of Sydney. I invest a lot on my sign. There's a lot of real estate in the street. So I thought I can be like them, show the house next to the real estate sign. And I got inspired by that. I don't know if that's bring directly business, but I believe that it bring awareness. And if someone come to see me, maybe doesn't know that because he saw the sign, but it's contributing. So I'm a big believer on that.
Just a couple of final questions to go a different direction. A great strategy is focused on the most impactful activities. In our experience, at any point, a company can really only effectively work on a finite number of key initiatives, typically 3 or 4. Can you tell us about a couple of your strategic initiatives and what you're using to drive the next phase of growth for your firm? How do you decide what those priorities should be?
I rebranded myself. So I'm just going through what I planned recently, which is a year, 2 years ago. I decided to brand myself from an NS studio through Natalie Scipioni Architects, which was, by the way, an advice from my mentor. He said to me, "You have an interesting name, why you don't use it?" I think after a month, I did it. I rebrand everything, and he was surprised I did so fast. Then an extra part of the office that was on the street, and that was my way to change and go in a different direction in a very strong way. I still have a business coach, but I'm in a transition and adjustment more than a plan of growth for the future, because my goal is not to grow. So I don't grow in the sense I don't want to have a big business. I want to stay small boutique business, and my goal is to be established, be recognized, a reference architect that can provide a good service and quality work. I'm going through this process.
I love the idea of a long-term plan. And in small business, long-term is really anywhere from 2 to 5 years. Can you share where you hope this journey will take you over the next couple of years? And what are some of the key strategic initiatives that you're thinking about as part of the rebrand and repositioning of the business?
It's in my mind. I need to have this structure in place. I think it's targeted more development and high-end project. It's try to expose myself through networking with real estate, property buyer, developer, going through LinkedIn. That is my next stage of development. So focus on a particular target market and go from there.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you for that, Natalie. That was my final question. Thank you again for sharing and being so open about the challenges and opportunities that you've faced. I wish you all the best in the future and look forward to seeing the continued success of Natalie Scipioni Architects. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.